we will look at loyal Mayo, the Orange, Unionist and Loyalist heritage of the U County. Again, please consider sharing this broadcast. In its 3rd of August 1968 edition, Connacht newspaper The Western People included an 1.5-inch column that many readers probably never even noticed. It reported that while digging for worms, a Ballina angler had made an unusual discovery. It reported that he had found a document seal for stamping communications. The bronze stamp also included a depiction of King William of Orange on horseback with 1690 underneath. But what was most significant was the seal's inscription, namely, glorious and immortal memory, ordinary Orange Lodge number 786. Angler Tommy Martin had rediscovered an item relating to the long forgotten Orange heritage of County Mayo. Now, the Battle of the Diamond in Loughgall, County Armagh, September 1795, the finale, if you like, of a long-running agrarian dispute that had took on sectarian overtones, that saw the birth of the Orange Institution, also indirectly guaranteed that this new institution in Connacht would always be ensured a hostile reception. The battle resulted in a forced exodus of the Catholic population from the greater Loughgall area and beyond, many of whom would drift westward. This was in an era when Protestantism in Mayo was both in an extreme minority and a place apart, best illustrated via the unique scenario in the county during the 1798 rebellion, when there was no Protestant element within the leadership of the local uprising. Now, even so, by 1798, every county of Ireland had some level of Orangeism working within its boundaries, including the most Protestant-starved county of Mayo, where Protestantism never, in recorded records, exceeded 3.2% of the population. With the activity of yeomanry units, one of the main reasons for their propagation, 2 working Mayo lodges had been formed by the end of the year. By 1823, this had increased to 6, all of which were confirmed as being maintained just over a decade later in the 1835 Parliamentary Select Committee report into the nature of Orange Lodges. It also indicated, whilst having a strong Orange presence, that it was not significantly strong enough to justify having a county-wide overarching structure. LOL 807 was based in Turlough, with its worshipful master J. McAdams. This was a village that in 1837 was referenced in local newspapers as being chiefly inhabited by Protestants of an inoffensive class. In terms of Orange activity beyond political lobbying, during the early 19th century, the sole references to Orange parades taking place in Mayo are confined to the village of Turlough. Even there, however, it is only acknowledged in local folklore, which tells that 12th of July processions were held in the ancient past, with the Turlough yeomanry the instigators. In 1835, LOL 1023 sat in the Foxford district under the leadership of the Reverend George Giles. Now, in contrast to the commonly promoted perception that many Irish Anglican clergy in an era of famine were only interested in the spiritual well-being of Irish Catholics, Giles is on record on several occasions as campaigning and lobbying for the destitute, all of the destitute in his locality. His politics, however, was very clear and unambiguous. He played a prominent role in the Protestant Conservative Society of Ireland. In 1832, a Sergeant Nixon in Foxford Constabulary was removed from his post for the crime of displaying orange lilies in the windows of the apartments in the barracks from the 1st to the 12th of July. In 1833, the Foxford Orangemen are recorded as attending divine service in the local church on the 12th of July, with the Reverend Giles delivering a sermon based on "Be ye doers of the words, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves." Foxford was a strong centre for Scots migrants and who were engaged heavily in a very well-known local woolen trade. It's quite possible that some of these Protestant immigrants were involved in the local institution. In the Ballina area, in 1835, the Reverend James Houston was master of LOL 1264, with very few other references to the lodge surviving apart from its base of operations in the 1860s. The legacy of the Spanish Armada's failed attempt to invade England in the 16th century and the subsequent shipwreck and survival of a small number of sailors in Connacht was apparent in the name of the Castle Bar lodge master. Ferdinand Langston was the worshipful master of LOL 1266, and he's listed in Slater's National Commercial Directory of 1846 as being the keeper of a public house in Castle Street in the town. The master of Binghamstown, LOL 1267, was William Bingham, a descendant of the Dorset-born Sir Richard Bingham, originally sent to Ireland by Queen Elizabeth I to quell rebellion, and he later became the governor of Connacht. Two relatives of Bingham, Henry Bingham of Anna House and Dennis of Binghamstown Castle, both Mayo, would both hold titles of Deputy Grand Master of Ireland some 20 years later. In the 1850s, this lodge was recorded as having moved and covering the Erris district of Mayo. Finally, LOL 1502 was Mullafany or Mullafari today, in the vicinity of Killala, where Robert Eakins was worshipful master. Now, during this period in the west of Ireland, the west of Ireland was regarded in Protestant evangelical circles across the entire United Kingdom as the front line in the war against Catholicism, and as a direct consequence, several schemes to establish missionary settlements were implemented. These included Dingle in County Kerry and Lough Corrib in County Galway. However, the most prominent was that of Duggart on Achill Island off the west coast of Mayo. Here, the Achill Island mission was established by Edward Nangle. Nangle himself had came from a very prominent line of Meath, County Meath, Roman Catholics. But his Catholic father's second marriage to a Protestant wife and her subsequent death saw him educated in the Protestant Cavan Royal School and later Trinity College, Dublin. A calling to the church saw him ordained in the Church of Ireland, and his clerical journey eventually took him to Achill Island in 1831, aged just 32. His next 20 years on the island, working for the Achill mission, saw him establish and build a colony at Duggart, open 4 schools, a post office, a printing press, a newspaper, the Achill Missionary Herald and Western Witness, and the island's first hotel. The island, with a Protestant population numbering just a small handful in the early 1830s, eventually included a Protestant settlement at Duggart alone well in excess of 400, the majority Roman Catholic converts. Where no Church of Ireland had existed, Within Nangle's time on the island would see 3 churches built at Duggart, Achill Sound and at Inishbiggle, whilst the parish of Achill would consist of 5 churches. Nangle's work was unsurprisingly filled continually with controversy, with a mixture of superism accusations, i.e. this idea that there were semi-forced conversions of Catholics to Protestantism via bribery, via food and other comforts, self-aggrandizement accusations, he was fathering his own nest, and simply the accusation that he was an evangelical fanatic. Nangle's success led the Catholic Archbishop of Tuam, Achill, to place substantial extra resources to the island via way of both priests and money in an attempt to combat Nangle's increasing achievements. Not all of Catholicism was critical of Nangle. North Mayo priest John Lyons said of him that he is doing a great deal of good for the poor people of Achill. Nangle's leaving to a new church in Sligo and rising immigration levels would eventually lead to the decline of the colony. Today, just one church of that former Achill parish exists, and that is Duggart, St Thomas's at Duggart on Achill Island, with an incredibly small population, single figures. Now, this Achill Island story took on a new aspect when a unique medal went on sale at a Dublin auction house in 2014. The solid silver medal depicting King William III was inscribed on the rear with Deputy Master, while on the front was engraved the simple word along the top, Achill, with supplemented by Orange Lodge. Achill Orange Lodge, LOL 1854, was active in the 1850s, and it's reasonable to suggest that the previously mentioned forthright Protestant missionary work was the cause of the foundation of the lodge. Now, Nangle was known at the time to have been a chaplain in the County Sligo Grand Orange Lodge, and in the 1860s he was a deputy Grand Chaplain of the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland. But the establishment of LOL 1854 did not actually come with him, and it came actually in the final days of his time on the island. LOL 1854 had been based in Dublin, cancelled in 1849, but renewed, brought to Achill by the Reverend Charles Henry Seymour on the 8th of January 1850. He had become a rector on Achill back in 1847. Seymour was a very highly respected deputy Grand Chaplain in the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland, and what few records we have that survive referencing the lodge include a note that in 1853 he vouched at a Grand Lodge meeting for a new member of 1854, a Roman Catholic convert on Achill called Richard McHugh. We also know that in 1859, the worshipful master was the now incumbent of Duggart Church, St Thomas's, the Reverend Nassau Cathcart. In 1856, the Grand Lodge returns had listed the 6 Mayo lodges of 1835 as being dormant. However, poor communications of the period are likely to have contributed to inaccuracies. LOL 807 was still active enough, that's Turlock, in 1854 for its worshipful master, the Reverend William Stoney, to complain to Grand Lodge that recent rule revisions did not contain reference to interfaith marriage. It had also allegedly been, incidentally, William Barker Stoney who had suggested that to a young Edward Nangle that he visit Achill after meeting him in Westport in 1831. In 1871, LOL 807 moved its seat of operations to Mullafarry, while in 1873, Mayo Orange Lodges 807 and 786 Ordinary, just outside Ballina, which had been working directly with Grand Lodge, were in future now working with number 3 district of the county Sligo Grand Orange Lodge. In 1875, the Achill Orange Lodge was back underneath a worshipful mastership of the Reverend Seymour, but bar 807 and 786, all of the other lodges were gone. In 1891, only Achill and Ordinary were referenced, with Achill recorded as having no return. LOL 786 Ordinary, the last working County Mayo lodge underneath Worshipful Master Charles Furr, was cancelled in 1901. In 1908, an article in the Belfast Weekly News newspaper stated that the remnants of the Ordinary Orange Hall could still be seen outside Ballina on the Ballina to Sligo Road. Now, whilst Mayo Orangeism ceased, Mayo Unionists did manage to survive well into the 20th century, and indeed the new Irish Unionist political philosophy that emerged in the 1880s in response to the possible imposition of Home Rule had a very strong organisational footing in Mayo. At its peak in 1893, the Irish Unionist Alliance had 21 local branches divided across 3 constituency associations. North Mayo had 8, South and East Mayo combined had 8, and West Mayo had 5. Others continued to be formed for several years to come, including one in 1894 in the Imperial Hotel Ballina at a meeting chaired by the Earl of Arran. And here's we see a membership card for the West Mayo branch of the Irish Unionist Alliance, belonging to W.H. Good. The established organisations actually worked quite efficiently, and an 1893 petition against Home Rule managed to gather 1,828 signatures, the majority of those in Mayo Protestantism choosing or eligible to sign choosing to do so. Electorally, however, the cause numerically was destined to fail, with the remarkable exception, one remarkable reception of a Castlebar Unionist, Mr. A.C. Laramie, returned as a councillor for Castlebar in 1899. One Mayo Unionist, one Mayo-born Unionist, did have Crossmolina, did have a high profile during the Home Rule crisis period, albeit outside his home county. Godfrey Featherstone Haw, Crossmolina, was the Unionist MP for North Fermanagh from 1906 to 1916. A united County Mayo branch of the Irish Unionist Alliance was still active and meeting right up until 1918. In September of that year, a meeting proposed and carried a resolution that included the statement, "We reaffirm our conviction that the legislative union with Great Britain affords the best security for the social, commercial and agricultural development of Ireland." Mayo Unionism was, however, already coming to terms with the belief that partition was inevitable. Beyond organisation within the county, Orangeism elsewhere on the island was to visit Mayo in highly public fashion in 1880. In 2015, a County Tyrone family began to make inquiries about a long-held family heirloom recently rediscovered. The item in question was a small silver medal bearing the name of a family forebear, George Monaghan. As is so often the case, the family concerned, whilst being settled in Tyrone, and with close relations in Scotland, England and Australia, had its roots elsewhere in Ulster, namely County Cavan. George had lived in the vicinity of Arva in Cavan, and family folklore acknowledges that he was a Boer War veteran and a very staunch Orangeman. What the family did not realise, however, is that George had a further notable place in history. Bearing the slogan, "In honour of the loyal and brave Ulstermen," the medal had been awarded to George following an Irish event that delivered a new word to the English language: boycott. The land question in Ireland had been a long-running cause of tension, with the issues of rent, fixture of tenure and free sale combining with evictions to create a highly emotive recipe for confrontation between tenants and landlords. Many tenants felt genuinely aggrieved, whilst for their part landlords, many of whom owned only small plots, simply operated what were within the preeminent economic and moral thinking of the times. Most landlords were not particularly greedy or selfish or evil. They simply believed that free trade was paramount and that there was a natural order in society in which individuals would fall into their own worthy place. In October 1879, the Irish Land League was formed, and a new episode, the Land War, the campaign to reduce rents and stop evictions, began. Less than a year later, Charles Stuart Parnell made a speech to League members in County Clare that would have far-reaching implications. Parnell spelled out what should happen when an evicted farm was taken over, explicitly that the person bidding or taking the evicted farm should be shunned. Shunned on the side of the road, shunned in the streets, shunned in the marketplace, and even shunned in worship. Parnell spelled out that those that were deemed to be transgressors to the movement be isolated in every way from their surrounding community. This new set of tactics would soon be put into operation in a setting that would garner interest across the world. On the 14th of October 1880, a letter appeared in the Times, the London Times, from Captain Charles Cunningham Boycott of Lochmask House, County Mayo. In it, he described how the Land League had been implementing a campaign against him and his family since September the 23rd. He could no longer get anyone to work on his farm or even in his house. He could not get supplies locally and had difficulty posting his mail. His animals were continually driven into the roads, and generally his property was being destroyed and his ability to manage his farm untenable. His plight was investigated by an English journalist who visited and interviewed Boycott, and soon events around the situation began to snowball. General suggestions made included that several trainloads of Orangemen from Belfast would make their way to Mayo to bring in Boycott's crops. But the possibility of that action causing an outbreak of sectarian violence saw it abandoned. Within Irish Unionism, the Land League was clearly perceived to simply be a vehicle for the more extreme voices of Irish independence. Not surprising, since its founder, Michael Davitt, had received a 15-year sentence for gun running. This belief meant that the Charles Boycott scenario was always sure to engender a motive reaction and the belief that he should be relieved. Bestbrook in South Armagh, Bestbrook man William Neal of Fountain Street in the town was the first to offer his services. In a letter to the Belfast newsletter on the 4th of November, pensioner former sergeant and self-described total abstainer, Neil, stated on the need for a relief expedition leader. "I am the man, and I will do it or fall in the attempt, and, please God, I shall succeed. I can go armed if necessary, for I have carried and used the arms of good Queen Victoria. Now I wait your reply. I am ready to start by the first train after getting the route. Hurrah for the road." Another writer underneath the pseudonym J.M. wrote, "I can use either spade or pitchfork, and if necessity arises, can use rifle and bayonet equally as well." The zeal of William Neil and J.M. was matched by many other newsletter readers who were both writing to the paper to express their support and also submitting subscriptions to help fund the expedition. The latter pages were filled on the subject for many weeks, and it was the newsletter who led the campaign to raise the total capital required, namely £2,000 for the operation to eventually take place. On the 10th of November 1880, a total of 32 Monaghan and 25 Cavan Orangemen, including George Monaghan, made their way to Lochmask, County Mayo. The progress of this boycott relief expedition was reported across the entire world, while the party was also accompanied by foreign journalists, including one from Russia, all of whom were anticipating a confrontation in the Mayo Mountains. Despite being considered an invasion of Mayo by some nationalists, the confrontation did not come. Terrible weather helped to diffuse the situation as the men, escorted and guarded by hundreds of soldiers, made their way to the boycott farm. The hard labour carried out by the Northern Orangemen included lifting 17 acres of turnips, mangoes and potatoes, whilst also thrashing 20 acres of corn that had already been cut. They departed Mayo on the 28th of November 1880. It had cost approximately 27 times the value of the crops to harvest them, with Captain Boycott and his family also having to leave their home. But a moral victory against the Land League was claimed. The events underway in County Mayo and the growing Land League campaign resulted in a special meeting of the Grand Orange Lodge of Ireland in November 1880 that in December saw the formation of the Orange Emergency Committee. Its purpose was to fundraise and organise the relief of boycotted farmers across the south and west of Ireland, both Protestant and Catholic. Thousands of subscriptions were received from across Ireland, the British Isles and much further afield. Local subcommittees were formed. Orange districts in the north supplied names of local men who were willing to carry out work, and a working full-time office was established in York Street in Dublin. Early missions included farms in Clare, Queen's County, now County Laois, Galway, and by October 1881, this committee had worked in 19 Irish counties. Their presence was occasionally accompanied by incident, with one of the most serious in April 1881, when a party were attacked by a crowd of about 300 people in Tipperary. All of these expeditions, however, were armed and had police protection. In August 1881, notice of one expedition on the borders of Limerick stated, "The members of the expedition, numbering over 50, are armed with revolvers and Winchester repeating rifles." In February 1881, In County Monaghan, a special meeting was called to celebrate the success of the boycott expedition, with a total of 71 specially commissioned silver medals struck, and with 57 of those going to men who had participated. George Monaghan was unable to be present to receive his medal. By now, he was a part of the emergency men who were engaged in relieving many other besieged landlords across the west of Ireland. Meanwhile, Boycott had left his Mayo home on the 27th of November 1880, with his situation continually following him to the extent that the hotel he briefly stayed in Dublin was warned that it too would be boycotted if he did not leave. He lived his final years in Suffolk, England. However, his name had already entered the English language as a term in its own right before his farm had even been finished being relieved. In late 1880, the Illustrated London News stated the word boycott had already become a verb, meaning to intimidate, to send to Coventry, and to taboo. Captain Boycott has not been remembered fondly by history, with even a romantic novel on the entire episode in 1846, and a relatively genteel film that was made in 1947, not combating the myth of a harsh, stubborn, greedy farmer taking advantage of Irish peasants. The great-great-nephew of Charles Boycott wrote of him in 1991, "My ancestor was not a bad man. He was a good one who loved Ireland and continued to love it, and returned to it when he could for the rest of his life. In 1880, he was trapped in circumstances which few would have envied." While specific aspects of their one-time presence have been remembered, generally the story of Mayo and its Orange and Unionist and loyal connections have been set to the side. For some, they may indeed be something they wish to forget. However, the stories are Mayo's stories. They are an intrinsic part of the county's history, and a loyal Mayo is very worthy, even today, of reference and examination. Today, there is still one county Mayo-born Orangeman, a Mayo native who lives in Mayo. He is a member of LOL 14C Cullies, belonging to the County Grand Lodge of Leitrim.